Why are women leaving the workplace in such significant numbers, especially since the pandemic in 2020? Let's chat about it. Since the pandemic, many workers were able to work from home. And because of that, women were also able to start working from home. Men were starting to be able to work from home. And so they were in their households, getting to see how their children were interacting, getting to have an experience with them. And despite the fact that many men have moved back to the workforce, even though they maybe got unemployed because of the pandemic or were sent home because of the pandemic, the rates for women joining back into the workforce since the pandemic has drastically declined. I looked at a couple of different articles to see what they are saying about some of the reasons why women are not going back to the workforce, because I think that this is just very interesting that the pandemic led to this great surge of women specifically, like not just men, but specifically women choosing to leave the workforce and stay home. A couple of the reasons that were given was stress and anxiety / mental health. A lot of women, especially those in the high earners or like high leader type of positions, reported that their mental health felt detrimental when they were working as compared to when they had that much more flexible schedule at home, or maybe to when they were unemployed just working in their households. A lot of women are saying that their stress and their burnout levels are much higher than they were a year ago, and 53% of the respondents say that their stress levels are higher, with almost half feeling exhausted. As a result, nearly 40% of those women looking for new employment cited burnout as a main reason why they weren't choosing to find a job, because they just couldn't. And so the extra stress of either finding a job or the extra stress of the fact that they had a job and now they do not was playing a big part in their decision to stay at home. I'm just going to pause right here real quick, let you know and remind you to click that subscribe button if you are enjoying this video. I talk about living an intentional life rooted in God's word. And so I talk about things like marriage, motherhood, wifehood, homemaking, and a lot of the cultural issues associated with that. I hope that you will follow along. Some of the other things were harassments and microaggressions. People say that female employees maybe got some gender comments or whatever, according to this one article, and that women in leadership had maybe much higher levels of microaggressions by their colleagues. Another reason was limited advancement, especially like if you're in a high management role already. At that point, like there's not a ton that you can advance. But in a lot of these cases, these women were saying like, listen, I can't keep advancing in my job. Why should I try to go back? Like, I've kind of done what I wanted to do in this sphere, and there's not a ton of potential for me to continue to grow. So like, I've kind of done that aspect. Let's move on with life. Now, another reason that a lot of women ended up leaving the workforce, according to at least two of these articles, mentioned the lack of flexibility that these women had. And so when you're in the workforce, a lot of these women are pressured and stressed into doing all of the same types of work as their male colleagues, just as they should for their job that they've been assigned. However, because of that, there's been a lot less flexibility with them. And so many of these women literally considered leaving or changing careers during these years of 2020 and 2021 due to burnout with what their jobs were because of like the lack of flexibility or the lack of pay in some cases for them. Many women leaders, quote unquote, say that flexibility is one of the top 3 considerations in job mobility. Yet, while many companies say that they embrace flexibility, only 33% of women in this one particular study say that their employers actually offer flexible work policies. And a lot of them also believe that flexible options impact their chance for a promotion. At the end of the day, lack of flexibility was the second most cited reason that women chose to leave their jobs, the first being the pay wasn't high enough. And a lot of women specifically fear asking for flexible work arrangements for fear that it will affect their careers, like maybe you might get fired if you're asking for it, or that genuinely don't believe that their workload would be adjusted in order to be granted a flexible schedule. A final reason that I wanted to talk about of why women were cited to have left the workplace was a lack of childcare. Now, for some of these women, it was the lack of financial access to childcare where literally they were like, this is too expensive. Like, it's literally more than what I'm making. Why would I pay more than what I'm making to have this childcare for my children? But some of the childcare issues that they were facing is the fact that especially women, and I found this super interesting, especially women with children 2 and under, they listed childcare or finding adequate childcare for their child was just not a possibility. And I think that this is so interesting, and I hope that it's become a more realistic part of society to understand that many women, when they have a baby, don't just want to place that child with any old person on the street. And also the fact that many, many mothers feel this inherent bond at some point with their young child, and to go back to work, either to cause financial stress or to cause emotional stress and burnout for the mother of these young children is just not worth it to a lot of these women. And so for many of these women, they actually have, they voluntarily leave a job because of childcare issues, or because their child was 2 years or younger, which I think is so interesting, because if you know me and you followed my channel for a little bit, you know that I speak a lot about how women, once they have a baby, especially, like, they have this desire to kind of stay home with that baby. Like, their natural inclination is to be, maybe not stay home is the right word, maybe go to work with the baby, but like to have that actual infant around them pretty much all of the time. And how this is kind of a very natural inclination for women to have. It's very biological. It makes sense from a scientific standpoint. And so I try to help people as much as I can learn how to live off of one income, so that way they can be able to stay at home with their very young children. And I think because also of the studies that are coming out about daycare and the harmful effects that it can have, especially on very, very young children, I think a lot of women are starting to take this into consideration and realizing, hey, like, this is my child. Like, I don't want to just leave them to any sort of person to, you know, spend the majority of their day with. I want to be able to be that person in their life, and that it's very beneficial for both the child and the mother to be able to spend those first couple of years together. And I don't know necessarily that that's the case with these statistics, but they are showing that people who voluntarily leave their job are usually doing it when they have a very young child, 2 or under. Now, obviously, in these articles, a lot of them phrased the phrasing as women resign their careers due to lack of childcare. And the way that they presented the analytics, it's showing that women are leaving. Some of them due to financial reasons, they can't afford childcare, but in a lot of these cases, it looks like some of the reason is the desire to spend more time with children, as they experienced probably during the pandemic when they were either working from home or not employed. That there is a percentage of women who absolutely want to spend more time with their children and are seeing that that's important. And I think that this is so beneficial for society when we can see that, especially with very young children, working from home or being able to have a job that is very welcoming of understanding the mother-infant bond is very important. And I think it's something that really isn't talked about in a lot of articles or like anywhere culturally. Like they won't tell you that, you know, maybe instead of having these women cut off their jobs completely to stay at home for 2 years, like maybe we should make part-time options more available. Maybe we should make it a lot more welcoming to women who want to bring their child with them to work. Like maybe we should make workplaces more family-friendly, family-oriented, rather than right away going to the option of just making this a very age-segmented society. If we think about how society has evolved throughout time and we look at historical evidence, we see that in most cultures and communities, a lot of the work that women were able to do, they did with a baby strapped on them. Like they were out there doing a lot of work in the fields maybe, or in the community, or maybe they were helping someone out, like wherever they were going, like maybe they sold something in the market. But whatever they were doing, in a lot of those cases, like they had their babies just strapped to them. Like it was just common knowledge that, of course, especially in Eastern cultures right now, they're doing this. But of course, if you were going to go to work, like your baby would be with you. It was just generally assumed that, of course, you wouldn't leave an infant away from its mother for extended periods of time. And yet, I think in this stage in history, we've kind of come to this place, partially because feminism has kind of pushed women out from their children, out of the homes. And not to say that what you have to do has to be within your home. There are, I think, a lot of options, and women that I know who were able to take their baby with them to maybe a part-time job that they had. And that was what they were able to do. And so because that work culture was very appreciating of them and like understood the value of their work, they understood that a child would only help accentuate that value, and that really you're causing the most happiness for mother and baby when you're being supportive of that. So anyway, I just thought that these articles were very interesting. I think that they point to a lot of good research that's showing that a lot of these women are stepping up and they're being like, you know what, listen, I don't want to spend the majority of my day away from, you know, the children. Like they're going to be going to bed in a couple of hours by the time I get home, and we just barely have enough time together. And I think that COVID has kind of helped to show women what's truly possible, and that truly you can live off one income. And that was one of the examples that the studies were citing, that women were realizing that they didn't need the 2 incomes, that they were able to live off of their spouse's income. So I am hoping that this trend continues, or at least that workplaces start figuring out that, you know, women are different than men. They're made to have children. They're made to have that child be near them a lot of the time, especially when they are very young. And so it would be fantastic if we started as a society recognizing that and being a lot more supportive of that. Thank you guys so much for listening. Go ahead and give this a like if you thought that any of this content was interesting.